The weight of words no one should have to carry. You'll never measure up to what my mother is. That's what came out of Alana's mouth that evening, my daughter-in-law right there at my dining table, just as I was bringing out the lemon cake I'd baked from scratch that morning. The room went still. My hands, holding the cake plate, started to tremble slightly, and I heard myself say, very quietly, "Then perhaps your mother should take over the rent payments." My son Daniel's face drained of color in an instant. "Rent payments?" he said, his voice climbing. "What are you talking about?" And in that moment, I knew something inside our family had shifted forever, that this wasn't just going to be about one terrible comment. It was going to unravel everything. My name is Margaret. I'm 70 years old, and that night taught me something I should have learned much earlier, that love without boundaries doesn't protect anyone. It just prolongs the inevitable. For half a year, I had been quietly covering the $750 each month for the place where Daniel and Elena lived. I'd told myself it was temporary, that it was what you did for family. I never imagined that while I was pulling from my savings the money I'd set aside over decades of alterations and hemming work, they saw me as something less than worthy, as someone whose sacrifices didn't count. It started 8 months earlier when Daniel came to see me on a Tuesday afternoon, his eyes red, his voice unsteady. He told me he'd been let go from his position and they were behind on everything. "Ma," he'd said, and his voice had that quality it used to have when he was small and frightened, "just until I get back on my feet. A few months at most." I didn't think twice. I went to the bank that Friday and set up the transfers. My life's work, saved quarter by quarter, suddenly flowing out to cover their housing. Daniel asked me not to tell Elena. "She'd feel terrible," he explained, "knowing we're depending on you like this. Let's just keep it between us." I believed him. I believed he was protecting her dignity. It didn't occur to me that he was protecting himself, protecting the image of being a man who could provide. Meanwhile, they continued living as though nothing had changed. I'd see the shopping bags when I visited, hear about the weekend trips they were planning, notice the new watch on Daniel's wrist, things they couldn't possibly afford, but somehow still acquired. The dinner that night had meant something to me. I'd spent the afternoon preparing Daniel's favorites, a slow-roasted pork shoulder with herbs, roasted vegetables with garlic, fresh rolls, and that lemon cake with the glaze he used to beg for as a boy. I set the table with the linen napkins my mother had embroidered, used the china I only brought out a few times a year, put fresh flowers in the center white tulips from the market. Elena arrived wearing a dress I knew cost more than I spent on groceries in 2 months, high heels that clicked sharply across my kitchen floor. From the moment they walked in, something felt wrong. She had that smile, the one that never reached her eyes. Daniel kept checking his phone, avoiding looking at me directly. All through dinner, Elena found things to critique: the temperature of the food, the way I'd arranged the living room, even the photograph of Daniel's father on the mantel. "Margaret, don't you think it's time you updated some of this?" she'd said with a wave of her hand. My mother just redid her entire place. Very clean lines, contemporary. You should see what good design can do for a space. I smiled tightly and said nothing. Every item in that house held a memory. Every piece of furniture told part of my story. I'd lived there for 28 years, raised my son there, nursed my husband through his final illness there. When I brought out the cake, I thought we might finally have a pleasant moment. I'd made it that morning with care, remembering how Daniel used to sneak extra slices when he thought I wasn't looking. Instead, I got those words spoken like a verdict. You'll never measure up to what my mother is. The shock of it paralyzed me for a moment. I stood there, still holding the cake, feeling something crack open inside my chest. Elena looked at me with something like satisfaction in her eyes, as though she'd been waiting all evening for the right moment to say it. "I'm sorry?" I managed, though I'd heard her perfectly. She leaned back in her chair, arranging her features into an expression of false concern. I said, "You'll never measure up to my mother. She's built an entire career for herself. She's independent. She has the beach house, the art collection, the connections. You've spent your life taking in hems and letting out seams. There's just no comparison." Each word landed like a stone. I thought about the years I'd spent bent over my sewing table, working until my hands ached and my eyes burned. The nights I stayed up finishing wedding alterations so I could pay for Daniel's school supplies. The times I wore the same coat through 3 winters so he could have new shoes. "Elena, that's enough," Daniel said quietly, but there was no real force behind it, no genuine defense. Those 2 words told me everything. He agreed with her? My own son, the boy I'd carried and raised and sacrificed for, thought I was less than. "No, Daniel, I think she needs to hear this," Elena continued, her voice taking on that shrill edge she got when she felt powerful. "My mother would never have let her child live like this. She would have set him up properly, not kept him in this kind of situation with her little acts of charity." She gestured around my dining room as though it were something shameful. That's when something settled into place inside me, a kind of clarity, a cold, hard understanding. I set the cake down very carefully, straightened my spine, looked at both of them. "Well, Elena," I said, and my voice came out calmer than I'd expected. "If your mother is such a superior woman, if she's so much more accomplished than I am, then I imagine she'd have no trouble taking over the financial responsibilities that come with being so successful." Daniel's eyes went wide. Elena's smile faltered slightly, but she still didn't understand. "I'm glad you finally see where you stand in this family," she said. "Oh, I see exactly where I stand," I replied. "I stand as the woman who has been paying $750 every month for your apartment on Birch Street. Unit 12, the one with the balcony." Silence dropped over the table like a curtain. Daniel stood up so fast his chair tipped backward and hit the floor. "What?" he said, his voice breaking. "What are you talking about?" Elena's face had gone completely white. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "The rent," I continued, my voice steady now, stronger than it had been in months. $750 on the 10th of every month, plus another $75 for the parking space the landlord charges separately. $825 total, transferred directly from my account, so you could live comfortably while you figured things out. Daniel sank back into his chair as though his legs had given out. "But you said," he stammered, "you said you'd worked something out with them. That they were giving us time." "I lied," I said simply. "I lied because I thought I was helping my son. Because I thought this was temporary. Because I believed that someday you'd thank me for what I'd given up." I looked at Elena directly. "But I see now that to you, I'm just an old woman who doesn't know her place, someone whose work doesn't matter, whose sacrifices are invisible." Elena tried to recover, but her voice shook. "Margaret, I didn't—" Daniel never said anything about— "I'm not interested in excuses," I interrupted. "If your mother is as remarkable as you claim, I'm certain she'd be delighted to help. After all, a woman with a beach house and an art collection shouldn't have any difficulty covering a simple apartment rental." The sarcasm in my voice was unmistakable. Daniel flinched. The air in that dining room had turned thick and difficult to breathe. Elena kept looking between Daniel and me, her mind clearly racing. Daniel's hands were shaking. He'd started to perspire visibly, small beads forming along his hairline. "Ma," he finally said, his voice cracking on the single syllable, "why didn't you just tell me? Why did you let me think something else was happening?" The question hung there, heavy and accusatory, as though I were the one who'd done something wrong. "Why did I lie?" I repeated slowly. "I lied because you came to me in tears, Daniel. You told me you'd lost everything, that you couldn't even afford to eat, that Elena was crying herself to sleep every night from the shame of it all. What was I supposed to do? Watch my child suffer?" Elena had gone very still, but I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how to salvage this. "I lied," I went on, "because I thought this was temporary. Because I believed that when you got stable again, when you found work, you'd be grateful. I never imagined that while I was skipping my medication to afford your rent, you were planning how to insult me in my own home." Daniel tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "No, you're going to listen now. For 8 months, I've been eating beans and rice for dinner, wearing shoes with holes in them because I couldn't afford new ones. Last week, I sold your father's pocket watch, the one thing I kept of his, the one thing I treasured. I sold it so I could pay your rent and still buy groceries." The tears came then, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry, furious. I sold the last piece of the man I loved for 30 years. And for what? To support a couple who thinks I'm beneath them, who looks at me like I'm an embarrassment. Elena found her voice, though it sounded smaller now. "Margaret, I didn't know. Daniel never told me you were helping. I thought—" "You thought what?" I cut her off. "You thought your husband had somehow managed to keep you housed and fed while being unemployed. Or did you just not think about it at all because it was convenient not to?" Daniel exploded then. "Ma, I never wanted it to go like this. You insisted on helping. I didn't force you." His voice had that desperate quality of someone caught in a lie they can't escape. "You insisted?" I said, and I heard my voice rise for the first time. "You came to my door sobbing. You told me you had nothing. What kind of mother turns her back on that?" The silence that followed was crushing. Daniel looked at Elena with something like betrayal in his eyes. She returned the look with equal intensity. Clearly, there had been lies between them, 2 stories that didn't match up. "You know what hurts the most?" I continued, feeling tears run down my face. "It's not the money. Money can be replaced. It's that every time you visited these past months, I saw it in your eyes. Elena criticized everything about my life, and you let her. You never once defended me. Never once said, 'That's my mother.' Show her respect." Daniel moved toward me, but I stepped back. "Ma, please. Let me explain." "There's nothing to explain." I heard the explanation. "Your wife thinks I'm nothing compared to her mother. Fine. Let her mother prove what kind of woman she is." Elena stood abruptly. "This is insane." "Margaret, my words tonight were—" I was frustrated about other things. "I didn't mean frustrated about other things?" I said with a bitter laugh. "You mean frustrated that you had to eat dinner at the house of the woman paying your bills? Frustrated that you had to pretend to be civil to someone you looked down on?" The tension was unbearable. Daniel started pacing like a trapped animal. Elena twisted her napkin between trembling fingers. "Do you know what the saddest part is?" I said quietly. "I really believed we were a family. When I married your father, Daniel, I dreamed of Sunday dinners and grandchildren. of laughter filling this house. When you were born after all those years of hoping, I thought I'd been given the greatest gift. Daniel stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes wet. Ma, I love you. You know, I love you. Love isn't just words, I said. Love is action. It's respect. When your wife insults me and you stay silent, when you lie to me about needing help while taking my money, that's not love. That's using me. Elena shot to her feet, knocking her chair over. I've heard enough of this. Daniel, we're leaving. Her voice had regained some of its earlier arrogance, but I could see the panic underneath. No, Daniel said firmly, surprising both of us. We're not leaving until we sort this out. Ma, please sit. We need to talk like adults. But I'd already decided. There's nothing to sort out. Everything's clear now. Your wife has made her opinion known, and you've shown me where your loyalty lies. Starting tomorrow, I won't be making those payments anymore. If Elena's mother is as wonderful as she claims, I'm sure she'll step in. But Ma, you can't, Daniel said, and now there was real fear in his voice. We don't have the money. I got let go again 2 weeks ago. I was going to tell you after dinner. The words fell like bombs. You lost another job 2 weeks ago, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. And you didn't tell me. You sat here and let your wife humiliate me, knowing you're completely dependent on my money. Elena spun toward Daniel, her face contorted with rage. What? You've been unemployed for 2 weeks? I've been spending like normal? Daniel, we're broke and you let me. She couldn't finish. She covered her face and started crying, but it looked performative, theatrical. Elena, let me explain, Daniel began, but she cut him off with a sound that was half sob, half scream. Don't tell me to calm down. I just spent $300 on a purse yesterday. Last week, I booked the salon for highlights. We're broke, Daniel, broke. Her makeup was running now, black streaks down her cheeks. She looked nothing like the polished woman who'd walked into my house. I watched this scene unfold with a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. For 8 months, I'd been the one holding everything together. Now they were finally seeing reality. Daniel looked utterly defeated. His shoulders slumped. His hands covered his face. You know what's pathetic? I said softly. Even now, even after everything, my first instinct is to ask if you need help. That's what mothers do. That's what love does, even when it shouldn't. Daniel lifted his head. For a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who came to me after nightmares. Ma, the job. I was late too many times. Elena had appointments and I had to drive her, and appointments? Elena interrupted viciously. They were facials, Daniel. Spa days. Don't blame me for your inability to be responsible. The mask had completely shattered. The elegant, superior woman was gone, replaced by someone desperate and afraid. Spa days? I said, incredulous. Your son lost his job taking you to spa days? While I was selling jewelry to keep a roof over your head? The laugh that came out of me was harsh and unfamiliar. Daniel reached for me, hands outstretched. Ma, please. I know I've failed you. But you can't abandon us now. We have nowhere to go. Elena's parents are traveling in Italy, and my parents aren't in Italy, Elena interrupted sharply. They're across town. You told me to say that so they wouldn't know we're struggling. Another lie. Another layer peeling away. Then go to them, I said with absolute finality. Go to Elena's parents. To that modern house with the art collection and the successful mother. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to take you in. Elena swayed slightly, as though physically struck. I can't go to my parents. They don't know Daniel's lost jobs before. They think he manages a department at an engineering firm. Before? I asked, my voice dropping dangerously low. How many jobs have you lost, Daniel? Silence. How many times have you lied to me? More silence, heavier than before. 4 jobs in 3 years, Daniel finally admitted, his voice breaking. I always found reasons. Always made excuses. Corporate restructuring. Budget cuts. Never my fault. He stopped and looked at me with those eyes that used to be my whole world. May, I think I have a problem. A real problem. For the first time that night, I felt something like compassion creeping in. My son wasn't just irresponsible. He needed help. Professional help. But compassion didn't erase the betrayal. Didn't heal the wounds. Recognizing it is a start, I said carefully. But I can't keep being your safety net while you refuse to change. I can't keep sacrificing myself to enable your problems. Elena stood, wiping her face with her sleeve. This is ridiculous. Margaret, you're his mother. Mothers don't abandon their children. My mother would never do this. The arrogance was creeping back into her voice like armor. Your mother has never had to do this because you've never told her the truth, I replied evenly. And you're right. Mothers don't abandon their children. But I'm not abandoning my son. I'm refusing to enable his destruction. Daniel grabbed my hands. They were cold and shaking. Ma, I swear I'll change. I'll get help. I'll find work. Do things right this time. Just one more chance. I looked at those hands, the ones I used to hold when he learned to walk, when he was afraid of thunder, when he needed comfort. How many last chances have I given you, Daniel? How many promises have you made? He couldn't answer. We both knew. The lease is up in 30 days, I announced, gently pulling my hands away. You have 1 month to figure something out. After that, I'm done. Elena stormed toward the door. Let's go, Daniel. I'm not staying here to be lectured by someone who doesn't understand what family means. But Daniel didn't move. Elena, go if you want. I need to talk to my mother alone. His voice had a firmness I hadn't heard in years. For just a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man he could have been. Elena froze mid-step when she heard Daniel's words. She turned slowly, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. You're asking me to leave? After everything I've put up with in this marriage? Her voice had gone shrill, nearly hysterical. She gestured wildly with her hands. Elena, please, Daniel tried to explain, but she cut him off with a sound that might have woken the neighbors. No, I'm not going anywhere. If you're going to grovel to your mother, you'll do it with me here. She crossed her arms and planted herself in the center of my dining room like a statue. Besides, this affects me too. If she stops paying, where do we live? A shelter? I watched this performance with detached fascination. In one night, I'd seen their entire facade crumble. It was horrifying and somehow liberating at the same time. Elena, I said quietly, I think you've said enough for one evening. You've made your feelings crystal clear. No, there's plenty more to say, she shot back. You can't just destroy our lives because your feelings got hurt. Families forgive. Families support each other. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Support each other, I repeated slowly. Like how you supported me tonight. Like how Daniel supported me by lying about everything. Is that the kind of support you mean? Daniel collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. Ma, I know we've hurt you in ways I can't take back. But if you turn away now, we literally have nothing. Nowhere to go. That's not my problem anymore, I said, and the words felt both cruel and necessary. For 70 years, I've taken care of others. My parents until they died. Your father through cancer. You since the day you were born. When did anyone last take care of me? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Never, Daniel said finally, his voice barely audible. I've never thought about taking care of you. I just assumed you'd always be there. Always be strong enough to solve everything. Elena was losing patience with the emotional conversation. Enough drama. Margaret, you're the mother. It's your job to help. You don't get to stop being a mother because it's inconvenient. Those words broke something in me. I walked right up to Elena until we were inches apart. When I spoke, my voice was so low and controlled that she actually stepped back. Don't ever presume to tell me about being a mother. I have been a mother for 35 years. I've given up my youth, my career opportunities, my savings, my health, everything, for my son. What have you sacrificed? Your weekly manicures? Your designer clothes? Elena tried to speak, but I didn't let her. Being a mother doesn't mean being an endless source of money. Being a mother doesn't mean accepting disrespect and contempt. Being a mother means teaching your child to be responsible, independent, and decent. And clearly, I've failed at that. Daniel jumped up, nearly knocking his chair over again. Don't say that. You've been an incredible mother. The problem is me. I'm the failure. Yes, Daniel. You have failed, I said. But I failed too by allowing it to go on this long. By enabling you to become a man who lies to everyone, who lets the woman who raised him be insulted in her own home. Tears were streaming down my face, but my voice held steady. Elena had started pacing frantically. This is a nightmare. An absolute nightmare. Mothers-in-law are supposed to help. We're supposed to be family. Family? I said with a harsh laugh. When have you treated me like family? From the day you met Daniel, you've treated me like an obstacle. Like something to be tolerated. That's not true, she protested weakly. Really? Remember Christmas when you said it would be better to celebrate alone because I didn't understand modern traditions? Remember when I offered to cook for your anniversary and you said you preferred something more upscale? Remember when you told me women my age should wear beige instead of the purple dress I loved? Each memory landed like a small knife. Daniel winced with every one. He'd been there. He'd heard it all. And he'd said nothing. Elena, you never wanted to be part of this family. You wanted me to disappear so you could have Daniel to yourself. Well, congratulations. You're about to get exactly what you wanted. Daniel grabbed my arm gently. May, please? Give me time to fix this. I'll talk to Elena. I'll get therapy. Fine work. I just need more time. Time? I said softly. I've given you 35 years. How much more do you need? Elena had stopped pacing. She was watching us with a strange calculation in her eyes, clearly trying to figure out her next move. Fine, she said with sudden false calm. If that's what you want, Margaret. But don't come crying to us later when you realize you've lost your only child forever. When you're alone in this house with nothing but your old memories, remembering you had a family and you threw them away because of your pride. The words were designed to wound, to make me feel guilty, to break my resolve. And for a second, they almost worked. The image of being completely alone, with no one to call, no one to visit, was terrifying. But then something shifted in me. A deep, unexpected calm. You know what, Elena? I'd rather be alone and at peace than surrounded by people who don't respect me. I'd rather have my old memories of a good marriage and honest work than make new memories of lies and contempt. Elena blinked rapidly, clearly not expecting that response. Daniel's mouth fell open slightly. And besides, I continued, feeling a strange new energy, I won't be as alone as you think. I got a phone call yesterday that changed everything. But you two were so focused on your plans for tonight that I didn't mention it. I paused, letting the moment stretch. Thomas Brennan called me. The name dropped into the room like a thunderclap. Daniel went rigid. Thomas Brennan? Your college boyfriend? From the photographs? I nodded slowly, savoring their shock. That's right. After 40 years of building a law practice in Oregon, after raising twin daughters and losing his wife 3 years ago, he decided to reconnect with old friends. He found me online. We've been talking every night for 2 weeks. Elena's voice came out strangled. What do you mean talking? I mean exactly that. Every evening we've been on the phone for hours, remembering who we used to be, sharing what our lives became. And last night he made me an offer I'm still processing. Daniel approached me carefully. What kind of offer? I smiled genuinely for the first time all evening. He invited me to spend a month at his place in Portland. He wants to show me the Pacific Northwest. Introduce me to his daughters. He said. I paused, feeling the emotion rise in my throat. He said he's wondered for 40 years what happened to me. Whether I was happy. Whether my dreams came true. But Ma, Daniel stammered, you can't just go off with someone you haven't seen in decades. What if he's lying? What if he's trying to scam you? Scam me? I said quietly. Like how you've been lying to me? Like how you've been using me? At least with Thomas, I'll see new places. Be treated with respect. Feel valued as a person, not just as a source of money. Elena had sunk into a chair, her face in her hands. This can't be real. You can't be serious about leaving with some stranger. Thomas isn't a stranger. He knew my dreams when I was young. He knew I wanted to write, to travel, to see the ocean. Do you know what he said when he first called? Margaret, I hope you chased every dream, because you deserved an extraordinary life. The tears came then, but they were different. Lighter somehow. When was the last time either of you asked about my dreams? About what I wanted from life? Silence. Thomas sent me pictures, his garden, the mountains, the view from his porch. He told me about the trips he's taken, the books he's read, the dinners he hosts for friends every week. And he told me something else. Elena looked up at me, eyes red with resentment. He told me that a woman my age has value, that I have stories worth hearing, wisdom worth sharing, love worth giving, that any man would be lucky to spend time with someone like me. My voice cracked slightly. After that call, I sat in my kitchen and cried for an hour. But not from sadness. From relief. Because someone finally reminded me that I'm more than just a mother. More than a provider. I'm a whole person with my own worth. Daniel had turned ashen. May, please don't make rash decisions because of tonight. Thomas could be telling you what you want to hear. Scammers do that. Enough, I said firmly. Enough trying to control my choices. For decades, I've lived entirely for you. Every decision centered on what you needed. For once in my life, I'm going to choose for myself. The silence was absolute. Daniel had slumped into a chair, his head in his hands, sobbing like a child. Elena stared at me with a mixture of hatred and terror. You know what else Thomas told me? I continued, feeling my confidence grow with each word. He kept a photograph of me from when we were 20. The one where I'm wearing the blue dress I'd sewn myself. He said that over the years, especially after his wife passed, he'd look at it and wonder if I'd been happy, if I'd fulfilled my potential. Daniel lifted his head, eyes swollen. What did you tell him? I told him the truth, that I had moments of joy, especially when you were small, when your father was alive, when I thought I was building something meaningful. But I also told him I'd sacrificed so much of myself that I'd forgotten who Margaret was before she became someone's wife or someone's mother. Elena stood abruptly as if stung. This is insane. You can't leave with this man. What will people think? A woman your age running off like some teenager. I looked at her directly and smiled with genuine peace. After tonight, Elena, I don't care what anyone thinks. If my own family considers me worthless, why would I care about strangers' opinions? Daniel found his voice. May, if you really want to see Thomas, if you want to travel, we could help plan something, but don't do this out of spite. Spite? I repeated, genuinely surprised. This isn't spite. This is survival. For the first time in my life, someone is offering me happiness, respect, partnership. Why would I refuse that? I walked to my window and looked out at the street where I'd lived so long. Tomorrow, I'm going to call Thomas and accept his invitation. I'm going to buy a plane ticket, pack my best clothes, and find out if it's possible to start over at 70. The weeks after that night were among the strangest of my life. Time seemed to move differently, as though I'd stepped into a parallel existence where the rules I'd lived by for 7 decades no longer applied. Daniel called constantly those first few days, leaving messages that ranged from pleading to angry to desperately apologetic. His voice on my answering machine became a soundtrack I learned to ignore, at least temporarily. Elena didn't call at all, which was somehow both painful and freeing. At least I knew exactly where I stood with her. There was a clarity in her silence that her words had never provided. Thomas and I talked every evening without fail, long conversations that stretched late into the night, just like when we were young and thought we had all the time in the world. He told me about his practice, about the cases he'd handled over 4 decades, about the clients who'd become close friends over the years. I told him about the wedding dresses I'd altered, about the stories each nervous bride had shared with me, about the small moments of beauty I'd found in what most people would consider ordinary work. Margaret, he said one night, his voice warm and rich through the phone, I've thought about you for 40 years. Even when I married Anne, when the girls were born, when I was building the practice and working 80-hour weeks, there was always this part of me that wondered what might have been if I'd been brave enough to ask you to come west with me back. Then, his words created a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten what it was like. I thought about you too, Thomas, more than I probably should have, especially during the hard times, when Daniel was going through his difficult phases, when your father was sick and I was caring for him around the clock. I wondered what my life might have looked like if I'd made different choices back then. Well, he said with that gentle laugh I remembered so vividly, it's not too late to find out, is it? We might be 70, but we're not dead yet. The plane ticket arrived in the mail 3 days later, though I'd insisted on purchasing it myself. I kept it on my bedside table where I could see it each morning when I woke up, a tangible promise of something new. March 21st. Destination, Portland, Oregon. A beginning instead of an ending. Thomas had offered multiple times to pay for the ticket, but I'd refused firmly each time. This was my choice, my journey, my decision. I wanted to fund it with my own money, even if that money was tighter than it had been in years after months of secretly supporting Daniel and Elena without them even knowing or appreciating it. 3 days before I was scheduled to leave, Daniel appeared at my door unannounced in the early afternoon. He looked terrible, almost unrecognizable. Gaunt, with deep dark circles under his eyes that made him look 10 years older. His clothes were wrinkled as though he'd slept in them for days, and there was a hollowness in his expression I'd never seen before. "May," he said quietly, his voice hoarse and rough. "Please, can we talk? Just for a few minutes?" I let him in but kept my emotional distance. Protected my heart the way I should have been doing all along. "Where's Elena?" I asked as I put water on for tea in my small familiar kitchen. "Her parents' house," he replied, sitting heavily in my kitchen chair, the same wooden chair he'd sat in as a boy doing homework while I prepared dinner. "She left last week. Packed all her things while I was at work. Left a note saying she couldn't stay with me if I couldn't support her in the manner she deserved." A flash of vindictive satisfaction shot through me, which I immediately felt guilty about, but the feeling was quickly followed by genuine sadness for my son. "And what are you doing now?" I asked, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. "I got a job," he said, and there was something different in his tone. Something that might have been the very beginning of pride. Night custodian at an office complex downtown on 5th. It's not much, pays just above minimum wage, but it's honest work. Real work, and I started seeing a counselor at the free clinic on Maple Street. Twice a week. I looked at him more closely then, really studying his face. There was something different in his eyes beyond just the exhaustion. Something that looked like the very beginning of genuine awareness, of real accountability. "I'm glad," I said simply, and I meant it with my whole heart. "That's good, Daniel. That's really genuinely good." He wrapped his hands around the teacup I set in front of him as though trying to draw warmth from the ceramic, trying to warm himself from the inside out. "Ma, I've spent the last few weeks thinking about everything. Really thinking deeply and honestly, for maybe the first time in my entire adult life. And what have you learned?" I asked, genuinely curious about his answer. Daniel took a long, shaky breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. "That I've been running away from responsibility my entire life. That every single time things got difficult or uncomfortable, I found someone to rescue me. Usually you. Always you, actually. And that by constantly rescuing me, by always being there to catch me when I fell, you accidentally prevented me from ever truly growing up." His words surprised me. Genuinely, deeply surprised me. The counselor helped me see patterns I've been repeating since I was a teenager, maybe even younger. Get in trouble, get bailed out, feel temporary relief, then repeat the whole destructive cycle. Like an addiction, she said. An actual addiction to being rescued. "And how do you break that kind of pattern?" I asked carefully, not wanting to hope too much, not wanting to be disappointed again. "By facing the full consequences of my actions without looking for someone to save me. When I lost this last job, my absolute first instinct, my immediate thought, was to run straight to you with a heartbreaking sob story. But this time I forced myself not to. Instead, I slept in my car for 4 nights until I managed to get the custodian position." "You slept in your car?" The automatic motherly concern rose up immediately, instinctively. "Yeah, in the parking lot behind the grocery store on Maple Street. And Ma, it was one of the most important, transformative experiences of my entire life. For the first time ever, I truly understood what it means to not have a safety net beneath you, to be completely, utterly responsible for yourself and your own survival. He looked at me directly, and I saw real emotion there, real understanding that hadn't existed before. During those nights, freezing and uncomfortable and genuinely scared about my future, I thought constantly about you. About how many times over the years you must have chosen between your own needs and mine. About all the times you went without something you needed, so I could have something I merely wanted. And you always chose me. Every single time you chose me. That's what mothers do, I said quietly, though the words felt less certain than they once had, less like an absolute truth. No, Ma. That's what mothers who haven't learned healthy boundaries do. And that's what sons who've never learned to be truly accountable do. He leaned forward across my kitchen table, his elbows resting on the worn wood. The counselor helped me understand that by always saving me, by always swooping in to fix my problems and mistakes, you were unintentionally robbing me of the opportunity to develop genuine resilience. To learn from my failures, to become truly independent and self-sufficient. It wasn't your fault. You didn't do it maliciously, but it happened anyway. The words stung like antiseptic on a wound, but they also liberated something deep inside me that had been trapped for years. The crushing guilt I'd been carrying about cutting him off financially, about refusing to rescue him this time, began to lift and dissipate like morning fog under sunlight. So what happens now? I asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. Now I prove to myself first, and then maybe eventually to you, if you'll let me, that I can be a genuinely responsible adult. I'm going to pay every single one of my own bills on time. Make my own choices and live with them. Face my own problems head on without running away. And when you get back from Portland, if you decide to come back at all, I want to be someone you can actually be proud of instead of someone you feel perpetually obligated to rescue. And if I decide to stay in Portland permanently, if I decide to build a new life there, Daniel smiled, and though there was sadness in it, it was genuine, real and authentic. Then I'll be genuinely happy for you, knowing you're finally living for yourself instead of constantly sacrificing everything for me and my problems. I'll visit when I can save up enough money for the plane ticket, which will take time, but I'll make it happen. Call you every single week like a proper, responsible son should. And I'll build my own independent, stable life knowing that you're finally, after 70 years, building yours. We sat together in comfortable silence for several long minutes, drinking our tea and simply being present with each other. It was the first truly peaceful moment we'd shared in years, possibly decades. No hidden agendas, no manipulation. Just a mother and son being honest. Would you tell me about Thomas? Daniel asked eventually, breaking the comfortable quiet. What was he like when you were young? What made you fall in love with him back then? An involuntary smile spread across my face at the question, warming me from within. He was brilliant. Genuinely brilliant, but not arrogant about it. Ambitious but gentle at the same time, which is rare. He had this remarkable way of making me feel like the most interesting, intelligent woman in the world. When we talked, he would focus completely on me, giving me his full attention as if my words were the most important thing he'd ever heard. I paused, remembering those distant days with unexpected clarity. And he believed in my dreams in a way no one else really did. When I told him I wanted to write someday, wanted to be an author, he didn't laugh or dismiss it as a silly fantasy. He asked what I wanted to write about. what stories I wanted to tell. He took me seriously in a way that felt revolutionary. Why didn't you go with him when he left for the States? Daniel asked gently, without judgment. Because I was scared, I admitted, the truth coming easier than I expected it to. Terrified, actually. Scared of leaving everything I knew and understood. Scared of failing in a new, unfamiliar place. Scared I wasn't good enough or smart enough for the ambitious life he was offering. And then I met your father, and he represented something completely different. Security, stability, a predictable, safe life. I looked at Daniel directly, meeting his eyes. I don't regret choosing your father, Daniel. Please understand that. He was a fundamentally good man. We had real happiness together, genuine love. But I do regret that I was too afraid to even seriously consider the alternative. That I let fear make all my major life decisions instead of courage. Daniel nodded slowly, processing this information about a mother he thought he knew. Do you think Thomas has really thought about you all these years? Or do you think maybe he's idealizing the past? Remembering you as better or more special than reality? It was a fair question. An important, legitimate one. You know, Daniel, I've asked myself that exact same question every single night since Thomas first called me out of the blue. Is what he feels genuine? Or are we both just two lonely older people romanticizing and idealizing a youthful relationship that might not have been as special as we remember? I got up and walked to the window, looking out at my garden where roses I'd planted 15 years ago were just beginning to show their first spring buds. But then I realized something important. Something that changed my entire perspective. What's that? It doesn't actually matter whether it's real or idealized or somewhere in between. How can it not matter? Daniel asked with genuine confusion in his voice. It doesn't matter if what we're feeling is pure nostalgia or idealization or genuine deep connection. What matters, what really matters, is that for the first time in decades, I feel truly, fully alive. I feel valuable as a person. I feel like a woman who deserves to be courted and admired and respected and cherished, not just tolerated or used or taken for granted. I turned to look at him, really look at him. When was the last time I felt like that, Daniel? When was the last time someone made me feel special and important just for being myself, not for what I could provide or sacrifice or give up? Daniel lowered his head, genuine shame written clearly across his features. I never made you feel that way, did I? Not once. I always just took you completely for granted. Assumed you'd always be there, always be available and willing to help, no matter how I treated you or what I asked for. Exactly right. And not just you. Your father too, especially toward the end of our marriage. He stopped seeing me as Margaret the person and started seeing me only as his wife. The woman who cooked his meals and managed the household and took care of him when he was sick. I stopped being a complete human being and became just a role to fill. At that moment, my phone rang, cutting through the heavy conversation. It was Thomas, calling at our agreed-upon time with his characteristic punctuality and consideration. I looked at Daniel, silently asking permission. He nodded for me to answer. "Hello, beautiful." Thomas's voice came through the phone, warm and rich, and I immediately felt that now familiar warmth spreading through my entire chest. "How was your day?" "I've been thinking about you." "Interesting and emotional," I replied, smiling despite the complex feelings swirling inside me. "My son is here with me. Would you like to say hello?" "Daniel, would that be okay with you?" Daniel looked surprised but nodded slowly, curiosity evident in his expression. I put the phone on speaker so we could all hear. Thomas, this is Daniel, my son. Daniel, this is Thomas Brennan. Hello, Daniel, Thomas said, his voice genuinely warm with no trace of awkwardness or defensiveness. Your mother has told me quite a bit about you over our conversations. It must be difficult for you, knowing your mother is planning this significant trip and possibly major life change. Daniel cleared his throat nervously, caught off guard by Thomas's directness. Yes, sir. It's complicated, honestly. But I'm starting to understand, finally understand, that my mother deserves to be happy and fulfilled, even if it means major, uncomfortable changes in how our family works and relates to each other. That's a remarkably mature perspective, Thomas replied with what sounded like genuine approval and respect. I'll tell you something, Daniel. I have twin daughters, both in their 30s now, and it took them years, literally years, to understand that their parents are complete human beings with their own needs and desires and dreams, not just eternal sources of support and resources and solutions. Daniel looked at me with visible surprise. He hadn't expected Thomas to be so direct and honest, yet so understanding and kind. Mr. Brennan, Daniel continued, his voice steadier now, more confident, may I ask what your intentions are with my mother? What you're hoping will happen? Thomas chuckled softly, but it wasn't mocking or dismissive. It was appreciative. That's absolutely fair to ask, and I respect you for asking it directly. My intentions are to get to know the woman that the girl I fell in love with 40 years ago became. To show her beautiful places she's never had the chance to see. To introduce her to my daughters and my life. To cook meals for her and listen to her stories and learn who she is now. And perhaps, if we both want it, if it feels right to both of us, to build a deep friendship or something even more meaningful. He paused thoughtfully. But there's no pressure, no expectations, no demands. Just two people in their 70s giving themselves permission to rediscover what joy feels like. And what if things don't work out the way you're hoping? Daniel asked, and I could hear the protectiveness in his voice that had been completely absent for so long. Then we'll have had a wonderful, memorable adventure together, Thomas replied easily, without hesitation. We'll have closed a chapter that was left open and unresolved for 4 decades. And your mother will have had a well-deserved vacation in one of the most beautiful parts of the country. There's no pressure here, Daniel. No unrealistic expectations or demands. Just two people who once cared for each other seeing if there's still something there. Daniel visibly relaxed, his shoulders dropping from their defensive posture, his jaw unclenching. Thank you for being so honest and straightforward, sir. I appreciate that more than you know. Please call me Thomas. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to speak with your mother privately for a few minutes. Personal matters, you understand. Daniel nodded and stood, moving into the living room to give me privacy for my phone call, closing the door behind him. How do you feel after talking to him? I asked Thomas once we were alone. I feel good about him, Thomas said thoughtfully, taking his time with his answer. He sounds like a young man who's going through a genuine period of real growth and deep self-examination. That speaks well of how you raised him fundamentally, Margaret. Children who never face any difficulties or consequences never develop real resilience or authentic character. His words reassured me more than I'd expected them to, validating something I'd been uncertain about. Thomas, are you absolutely sure you want to bring a woman with so much family complexity and drama into your peaceful, settled life? I come with considerable baggage and complications. Thomas laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made me smile. Margaret, sweetheart, We all have family complexity and drama at our age. That's just reality. One of my daughters got divorced last year and moved back home with her 2 young sons for 6 months. My other daughter calls me crying every other Tuesday about her marriage troubles and career frustrations. Family drama and complications are just part of life at this stage. The difference is in how we handle it all. With clear boundaries, with tough love when it's necessary. And by always remembering that our adult children are ultimately responsible for their own choices and consequences. He paused meaningfully. Something it sounds like you're finally learning to do as well, which makes me proud of you. After I hung up with Thomas, Daniel and I talked late into the night, long past when I would normally go to bed. He told me more specific details about his therapy sessions, about how he was learning to identify and interrupt destructive behavioral patterns he'd been repeating for years. Decades even, without ever really being conscious of them. You know what was the absolute hardest thing to accept in therapy? He asked me as we sat together in my living room, the room where he'd played with toys as a child and done homework as a teenager. What's that? That it wasn't just that I was lazy or immature or irresponsible, though I was all those things. It was that I had actually developed a genuine emotional addiction to being rescued. Every single time someone solved a problem for me, every time you or anyone else gave me money, or got me out of trouble, or fixed something I'd broken, I felt this kind of euphoric relief, this rush, like a hit of dopamine straight to my brain. It was genuinely, chemically addictive. His words struck me deeply, reframing years of behavior in a new light. And how are you supposed to break that kind of powerful addiction? By facing the full, unpleasant consequences of my actions without seeking rescue or looking for someone to save me. Without manipulating people emotionally until they help me. When I lost this last job, every instinct I had, every fiber of my being, was screaming at me to come running to you with a heartbreaking story designed to make you rescue me. But this time, I forced myself to resist that instinct, to sit with the discomfort and fear, to sleep in my car and feel the cold and the uncertainty and the genuine terror about my future. You really slept in your car for 4 nights? I said again, the motherly concern rising automatically despite everything that had happened. Yes, 4 long, cold, terrifying nights. And May, it was one of the most transformative, important experiences of my entire life. For the first time ever, really and truly for the first time, I understood what it means to not have a safety net beneath you. To know that my choices have real, immediate, painful consequences. That no one is coming to save me or fix things or make it all better. He looked at me with those eyes that had once been so innocent and trusting. During those nights, shivering in my car, genuinely scared about where I would end up, I thought constantly about you. About all the times over the years you had to choose between paying for something you needed, something essential for your health or well-being, versus something I wanted or claimed I needed. About how you always, without exception, chose me and my needs over your own. About how I never, not even once, thought to ask if you were okay, if you had enough, if you needed anything, if you were happy. That's what mothers do, I said, though the words felt different now. Less like an absolute truth and more like an excuse I'd been telling myself. No, Ma, that's what mothers who haven't established and maintained healthy boundaries do. And that's what sons who have never learned to be truly independent and self-sufficient do. He leaned forward earnestly, intensity in his expression. The therapist helped me understand, really helped me see clearly, that by constantly rescuing me from consequences, by always swooping in to fix my problems and mistakes. You were unintentionally preventing me from developing the essential skills I needed to be a functioning, responsible adult. It created this terrible, destructive cycle where I stayed dependent and childlike, and you stayed overburdened and exhausted. Neither of us was healthy or happy. The words hurt, cutting deep, but they also freed something that had been trapped inside me for years. The crushing, suffocating guilt about refusing to help this time, about choosing myself and my own well-being for once, began to dissolve and disappear like salt dissolving in water. So what happens now? I asked quietly, almost whispering. Where do we go from here? Now, I prove to myself and then eventually to you, if you'll allow me the chance, that I can be genuinely, consistently responsible. I'm going to pay every single bill on time, every month. Make my own decisions and live with the consequences, good and bad. Solve my own problems without running to someone else for help. And if you come back from Portland, whenever that might be, you'll find a son you can genuinely respect and be proud of instead of one you feel perpetually obligated to rescue and enable. And if I don't come back? If I decide to stay there permanently and build a new life? Daniel smiled, and despite the obvious sadness in it, despite the pain, it was real and authentic. Then I'll be genuinely, truly happy for you, knowing you're finally living the life you deserve and have always deserved instead of sacrificing absolutely everything for me and my problems. I'll visit when I can save up enough money for the plane ticket, which will take time, but I'll make it happen. Call you every single week like a proper, responsible son should. And I'll build my own independent, stable life knowing that you're finally, after 70 years, building yours. The day of my departure dawned clear and bright and beautiful, with a gentle spring breeze that felt like encouragement, like permission, like the universe itself was telling me to go, to be brave, to choose myself and my own happiness for once. Daniel arrived early to drive me to the airport, and for the first time in what felt like decades, there was no tension crackling in the air between us. No unspoken resentment simmering beneath polite conversation. No hidden manipulation or agenda. Just a comfortable, peaceful quietness between a mother and son who were finally being completely honest with each other. He had brought flowers, a modest but lovely bouquet of white daisies, which he knew had always been my absolute favorite, and a sealed envelope with my name written on it in his handwriting. "Don't open it until you're actually on the plane, up in the air," he said with a shy smile that reminded me powerfully of the little boy he'd once been, before everything got so complicated. "It's something I needed to tell you, things I needed to say, but it's easier for me to write it down than to say it out loud face to face." During the drive to the airport, we talked about simple, everyday, normal things. The unseasonably warm weather, a news story we'd both heard on the radio, his work schedule for the coming week and what shifts he'd be working. It was ordinary, pleasant conversation, the kind a mother and son should have regularly. Something we hadn't managed to achieve in years, maybe longer. "Me," he said as we pulled up to the departure terminal. Cars honking and people rushing everywhere. "I want you to know that no matter what happens in Portland, no matter how things turn out with Thomas, this whole experience was already worth it. All of it." "What do you mean by that?" "Seeing you like this, excited, nervous, alive and vibrant. I haven't seen you look this way in years. Maybe decades, honestly." He helped me get my suitcase from the trunk. The suitcase I'd carefully and lovingly packed with my nicest dresses, including a new green one I'd splurged on specifically for this trip. spending more than I normally would, but feeling like I deserved it. At the security checkpoint where we had to say goodbye, where he couldn't go any further, we hugged tightly and held on. Really hugged, a genuine embrace, not the brief, obligatory, awkward embraces we'd been exchanging for years that meant nothing. "I love you, Ma," he whispered in my ear, and his voice cracked with genuine, raw emotion. "Go have an adventure. Fall in love. Be happy and alive. Live your life fully. You deserve it more than anyone I've ever known in my entire life. I love you too, son. So much. And I'm so proud of the man you're becoming, the man I'm watching you work so hard to be. Truly, genuinely proud." Once I was through security and had found my gate, I settled into an uncomfortable airport chair and opened Daniel's letter with hands that trembled slightly with anticipation and emotion. His handwriting looked more mature than I remembered, more careful and deliberate, as though he'd taken real time with each word. These past few weeks, I've been remembering and thinking about all the times you were quietly heroic without me even noticing or acknowledging it. When you worked those brutal double shifts to buy my textbooks for school. When you sold your good sewing machine, the professional one you loved, to get me that bicycle I wanted so desperately. When you pretended you weren't hungry so I could have seconds at dinner. When you stayed up all night taking care of me when I had pneumonia and you were terrified I might die. All those countless moments of quiet, invisible, unappreciated love that I took completely for granted. Now I finally understand that being a good mother doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until you disappear entirely and nothing of you remains. It means loving someone enough to teach them independence and resilience. It means being brave enough to let go when the time comes, even when it's painful and frightening. Thank you for finally loving me enough to let me grow up. Even at 35, apparently, I desperately needed to do that. Fly high, Ma, in every single sense of the word. All my love and respect. Daniel P.S. Thomas is one incredibly lucky man to get to know the most extraordinary woman in the entire world. Tears streamed down my face as I carefully folded the letter and tucked it into my purse, into the interior zippered pocket where I kept my most precious things. Through the massive airport windows, I could see planes taking off constantly, disappearing into clouds that stretched endlessly across the bright sky. And for the first time in decades, I felt like my future stretched just as infinitely, full of possibilities I'd never allowed myself to imagine. Thomas was waiting for me at the Portland airport, standing near the arrival gate, holding a beautiful bouquet of yellow roses and wearing a smile I recognized instantly. Immediately, even though his hair had gone completely white and deep lines creased his face in ways that somehow made him more handsome. When he saw me coming through the gate, pulling my suitcase behind me, his entire expression transformed with pure joy. "Margaret," he said as we embraced carefully, tentatively, and then more firmly, and I could feel his heartbeat against mine, steady and real. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered, even more beautiful than in all my memories and dreams." The days that followed felt like living inside a dream I didn't want to wake from, didn't want to end. Thomas took me to see the Oregon coast, that famous dramatic coastline. For the very first time in my 70 years of life, I stood at the edge of the Pacific Ocean and watched enormous, powerful waves crash against black volcanic rocks under a sky that seemed impossibly vast and endless. He introduced me to his twin daughters, Emma and Sarah, who welcomed me with a genuine warmth that moved me deeply and unexpectedly. "Dad hasn't looked this happy since before Mom passed away 3 years ago," Emma told me privately during lunch at her house, her hand on my arm. Thank you for bringing the light back to his eyes. We'd almost forgotten what he looked like when he was truly happy. Thomas cooked for me every single evening, elaborate, thoughtful meals we savored slowly on his deck while watching the sun set behind mountains I'd only ever seen in photographs or on television. We talked for hours and hours about our lives, our regrets and disappointments, our hopes for whatever time we had left. It was as though the 40 years that had passed simply vanished, dissolved, when we were together. You know what I love most about being with you? He asked one evening as we walked slowly through his tree-lined neighborhood, holding hands like teenagers. What's that? When I'm with you, I'm not Anne's widower, defined by loss. I'm not the worried father constantly concerned about my daughters and their problems. I'm not the retired attorney. I'm just Thomas, the man who fell in love with a brilliant, beautiful woman 40 years ago and never completely forgot her. Never stopped wondering what might have been. His words reached something deep in my soul because they expressed exactly, precisely how I felt when I was with him. I wasn't Daniel's long-suffering mother. I wasn't Frank's widow. I wasn't the tired, invisible seamstress who'd spent her entire life bent over alterations, making other people look beautiful for their special occasions. I was just Margaret, a woman with stories to tell, dreams still to chase, and love still to give. At the end of my planned month in Portland, when I was supposed to return home, Thomas made a proposal that fundamentally shifted my entire understanding of what was possible at 70 years old. Margaret, I don't want this to end. I know it's fast. I know we're just rediscovering each other after 4 decades apart. But I want you to seriously consider moving here permanently. Not to get married right away if that feels too fast or overwhelming. Not even to live together immediately if you're not comfortable with that. But to give ourselves the genuine chance to build something real and meaningful in this final chapter of our lives. My very first instinct, my automatic response, was to think of all the logical, practical reasons why it was impossible. My house that I'd lived in for 28 years, filled with memories. My few remaining friends who still lived nearby. My entire established life back home. But then I thought of Daniel's letter, of his beautiful words about flying high. I thought of Elena, who'd never respected me and likely never would. I thought of all the decades I'd lived entirely for other people while consistently pushing my own dreams to the side, telling myself someday and later until someday never came and later turned into never. What if we try and it doesn't work out? I asked cautiously, needing to voice the fear. Then we'll have had a beautiful adventure together, Thomas replied simply, no hesitation. But Margaret, what if it does work out? What if after an entire lifetime of putting everyone else first, of sacrificing your own happiness, you finally get the chance to be completely, unreservedly happy? Don't you deserve to find out? That night, I called Daniel to tell him about Thomas's proposal to make this move permanent, to make this new life real. His response surprised me and filled me with genuine hope for his future, for both our futures. Ma, are you happy with him? Truly, genuinely happy? Happier than I've been in decades. Maybe happier than I've ever been in my entire life. Does he treat you with real respect? Does he value you as a person? Does he make you feel appreciated and cherished every single day? Yes, to all of it. Every single day, Thomas makes me feel valued. Then stay, Ma. Build the life you deserve and have always deserved. I'm going to be fine. Actually, I'll be better, healthier, knowing that you're finally living for yourself instead of constantly worrying about me and sacrificing for my problems. 6 months later, I was carefully packing my most precious belongings, the things that truly mattered, preparing to move permanently to Portland. A completely new life at 70 years old. Daniel helped me with absolutely everything, showing up every day to pack boxes, demonstrating a level of genuine maturity and reliable responsibility that made me deeply, genuinely proud. You know what's the most ironic part of all this? He asked as we wrapped family photographs in newspaper, protecting memories for the long journey west. What's that? By letting you go, by releasing you to live your own life without guilt or obligation, I feel like I finally got you back. Not as the mother who constantly rescued me from my own mistakes and poor choices, but as the remarkable, interesting, valuable woman you always were, but who I never bothered to truly know or appreciate. As I write this from Thomas's deck, watching the Pacific Ocean stretch endlessly to the horizon and waiting for him to return from the farmer's market, where he's buying fresh ingredients for the dinner we'll cook together tonight, I reflect on everything that has transformed and changed in my life. Daniel has successfully built his own independent, stable life. He got promoted at the custodial company to a supervisor position, moved into a better, nicer apartment that he pays for entirely himself, never asking me for help, started dating a woman named Rebecca who challenges him to be better, to grow, rather than enabling his worst patterns and behaviors. Elena, he mentioned briefly in passing during one of our weekly calls, married someone much older who can easily support her expensive lifestyle and constant demands. It's probably for the best for everyone involved. And me? I finally learned at 70 years old that happiness doesn't have an expiration date stamped on it. That self-respect isn't selfishness, but rather the essential foundation for loving others in healthy, sustainable ways. That a 70-year-old woman can have genuine adventures, can fall deeply in love again, can start her entire life completely over from scratch and build something beautiful. Thomas and I got married just last month. A small, intimate ceremony on the beach with his daughters and Daniel as our only witnesses. Daniel cried throughout the entire ceremony, but they were tears of pure joy and happiness. I never imagined I'd see my mother marry for genuine love, he told me afterward, his voice thick with emotion, hugging me tightly. I always assumed your marriage to Dad was just about duty and responsibility and circumstance and making the best of things. Now I understand what's actually possible when two people truly value and cherish each other. When I look back at that terrible night when Elena humiliated me in my own dining room, when she told me I'd never measure up to her mother, I see it now as perhaps the greatest gift I could have possibly received, because it shattered my comfortable illusions, woke me up from decades of sleepwalking through my own life, showed me I deserved so much more than I'd been accepting and tolerating, gave me the courage to pursue happiness I'd thought was lost to me forever, impossible at my age. And you, reading this story right now? What would you do if life offered you an unexpected second chance at complete, genuine happiness? Would you be brave enough to seize it, to grab it with both hands, no matter what anyone else thought? No matter how unconventional or crazy it seemed? Because I promise you this, from the bottom of my heart, it's never ever too late to begin again.